Thank you, Ranking Member. And before I introduce our distinguished witness, I want to ask unanimous consent that Representative Meyer be allowed to join this committee and ask questions following all the other subcommittee members. Without objection, we'll allow Rep. Meyer to join. And now I want to introduce our witness. We have with us today the Honorable John F. Sopko, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. Mr. Sopko has been in this position since 2012 and has seen the situation in Afghanistan change significantly over the last decade. Thank you for joining us here today to speak about your work, your findings, and help Congress chart a path forward. I'll now recognize Mr. Sopko for 5 minutes, and without objection, your prepared written statement will be made part of the record, Mr. Sopko. Please.
Thank you very much. Chairman Castro, Ranking Member Malliotakis, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. Without a doubt, our country's experience in Afghanistan has been costly. It lasted over 20 years. We spent over $145 billion on reconstruction, and we cannot forget that more than 2,400 Americans paid the ultimate price in defense of liberty in Afghanistan. Additionally, over 21,000 of our troops were wounded and continue to bear the scars of conflict. These are sobering numbers, and we owe all who served in Afghanistan, as well as the long-suffering American taxpayer, an accurate accounting of what worked and what did not work in that country. Since Congress established SIGAR in 2008, we have publicly issued over 600 audits and other reports, including 11 lessons learned reports, in an attempt to do just that. Our work demonstrates that no single policy decision nor administration led to the failure of our reconstruction effort. Rather, it was a series of decisions made over 2 decades that led us to this point. The seeds of the collapse in Afghanistan were sown well before the last 60 days. But the questions now are, what could we have done differently, and what must we prepare to do differently in the future? For the sake of brevity, let me highlight just 3 key areas from our reports for your consideration. First, the U.S. government's inability to get the right people into the right jobs at the right time was one of the reconstruction mission's most significant failure. While the State Department has statutory authority, for example, to lead security sector assistance efforts overseas, it does not have the personnel, expertise, or resources to do so. This left the Defense Department to fill that void, resulting in less qualified and poorly trained personnel undertaking key diplomatic and development roles. Additionally, state and USAID experienced frequent staff turnovers in Afghanistan of a year or even less service there, leaving their successors to start from scratch and make similar mistakes all over again. Secondly, U.S. government agencies, including state and aid, rarely conducted sufficient monitoring and evaluation, or M&E as we call it, to understand the impacts of their development efforts. The absence of periodic reality checks created the risk of doing the wrong thing perfectly. By that I mean a project that completed required tasks would be required successful, even though it did not achieve or contributed to broader, more important goals. If better monitoring and evaluation processes had been in place to evaluate programs to combat corruption, develop the economy, build the Afghan security forces, many of the problems that contributed to the rapid collapse of the Afghan state could have been corrected. Measuring success by focusing on dollars and cents is no substitute for common sense. Thirdly, and probably more importantly, the U.S. government did not understand the Afghan political and cultural context, thereby leading to empowering corrupt power brokers and politicians, forcing inappropriate Western technocratic models on Afghan institutions, imposing formal Western rule of law on a country that addressed most disputes through informal means, and struggling to understand and mitigate cultural barriers to supporting women and girls. This failure meant projects intended to mitigate conflict often exacerbated it. To be sure, state and aid had successes, but their sustainability of those gains is obviously now in grave doubt. Now, the book on Afghanistan is not yet closed. Questions remain unanswered. Questions that SIGAR has been tasked by Congress to investigate, including the sudden collapse of the Afghan government and security forces. At the request of your colleague, Chairman Barra, we will also be conducting an audit of the Special Immigrant Visa Program. I look forward to working with this subcommittee and members as we undertake these efforts, and I look forward to answering all the questions you have today.